Now let's move on to the flight portion. Okay. Pre-flight with or without the examiner. I've had it done both ways. I've had examiners say, hey, go pre-flight the aircraft, come in, let me know when you're done. And he's got his feet up on the table and he's drinking coffee, and it was a relaxing and, check ride. And then I've also had the examiner walk out there with me. And then as I'm going around the aircraft, they're saying, what is this? What is this? What is this? What's the limitation with this? What is this way? What does this mean? What happens if you find this? So I've had both. I've had examiners participate in every single item of the pre-flight check. And I've had examiners that are just like, yeah, man, you're good. Just tell me when you're done, type of thing. Okay. So don't be bothered one way or another. One piece of advice that I will give you right now about the pre-flight portion is if the examiner is out there and they're asking you questions, this may be a time that they are looking to intentionally distract you to see if you pick up from the last item that you checked. So let's say I'm going down the pre-flight checklist and I'm checking this, and then I need to check this, and I need to check this in sequence, thing A, thing B, thing C. In between thing A and thing B, he asks you this unrelated question over here. What he's also looking for is to say, okay, I have checked thing A. I was about to check thing B. Let me go back and check thing B. And so they may be using it as a form of distraction. Some examiners have their own ways of doing things. So what I like to do is, as I'm doing the checklist, I'm putting my thumb on where I am, and it's the next thing down, next thing down, next thing down, next thing down. And so if he asks me a question, I have my thumb ready to go on the item for which I need to check next, or the item for which I just checked. So that helps me save my place in the checklist. In general, the examiner is going to kind of pre-brief you prior to flying, but in general, the examiner will not touch the controls unless he's acting as an autopilot. Sometimes you need to say autopilot on, and then he grabs the controls, and then he'll say autopilot on, I have the controls, or something to that effect. It will be a very clear delineation. If it becomes a safety of flight issue, if he feels unsafe, or if he needs to terminate the check ride for any reason, he will say, I have the controls, the check ride is terminated, we are returning home, or something to that effect. But they're going to brief you ahead of time on who has the controls and who doesn't, and all of that. Okay. But in general, the examiner won't ever touch the controls. So be confident in your own abilities and expect to fly the entire time. And that means even if you're on your knee pad and you're adjusting charts and you got to flip something over, or you need to scroll, you're going to have to learn how to do that one-handed, or figure out how to best set up the cockpit for success. And your instructor can help you out with that. Okay. All right. He may also act as ATC. So he may say, you're out in the practice area, wherever that happens to be. And he may say something along the lines of, all right, helicopter 1, 2, 3, 4, turn left, downwind, whatever, intercept this and do this. He may act as ATC. Okay. He can also act as a second set of eyes for you. So you want to do your clearing turns, and he will say, or you may ask him, hey, I can't see through you. Do you mind clearing the airspace off to the right? Or can you clear the right side? Or can you clear the left side? Whatever side he's sitting on. Know where you are at all times. I bring this up because of, this is a personal story. On my commercial airplane check ride, by this time I was already a CFI, or certified flight instructor for helicopters, and I got my private and my instrument, and I was working and I was taking my literally commercial airplane check ride. It was a hot, muggy day out in the East Coast. We're flying in Maryland, where there's no real delineation between the farm fields rolling this way or the farm fields rolling this way. So I kind of generally knew where north, south, east, and west were. I was doing 8s on pylons, or, all these Shenandels, lazy 8s, and all this other stuff. And so I became disoriented. The examiner, as we were flying, said, I want you to fly a heading of, 240, and we're going to head back in and we're going to practice this. And so I'm flying and I'm on a heading of 240, and I'm literally, I generally know where we are, but I didn't know specifically where we are. And I was moments away from saying, hey, I'm kind of disoriented. I'm lost. Can you help me out? Which would have been like an immediate, failure on the check ride. And then I happened to look out and saw something familiar. I'm like, oh, I know where that is. I know where I am. Yeah. All right. She didn't know about it. I knew about it, and I want to share it with you so that you can learn from my mistakes. Now, when I was flying in Seattle area, we have mountain ranges. We have, long north-south, very easily identifiable areas, and lots of familiar areas that I grew up in. So I knew, oh, that's the neighborhood that we did this, and that's my friend's house is over there. That's where we did this. So I knew exactly where we are. And on the East Coast, I wasn't familiar with that area, and it was hazy and muggy, and visibility was maybe 5-7 miles, and so you couldn't really see that far. And so I didn't really know. It was just a bunch of farm fields. So anyways, I tell you that story because I want to reiterate, it is absolutely important that you know where you are at all times. And so he or she may ask you, point to me where we are on the chart. And you have to say, okay, right here. Now, if you're using Preflight or any other, kind of flight following or electronic flight flag, that kind of takes the ambiguity or the not knowing where you are. Or if you have a beautiful glass cockpit with a GPS, saying I'm right here and this airspace is over here. But anyways, I digress. So know where you are at all times. Okay. During my commercial helicopter ride, we had to do an off-airport landing at a pinnacle out in the mountains, and it was kind of like an old logging road kind of cut out, and it was nice, beautiful 3-sided pinnacle that we were shooting approach on. And I had trouble finding exactly where the winds were coming from. And I was shooting the approach, and I felt like I was coming in too fast. And I said, I don't like this approach. I'm gonna go around. So I went around and then shot the approach again, and it came in and land. And that is perfectly okay. So anytime you're not comfortable with the approach that you're shooting, or something doesn't feel right, it is perfectly acceptable to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go around. We're going to reset this, and let's try this again. Okay. You may fail the check ride as a result, or you may not. It's up to the examiner's discretion. For example, if I'm shooting a normal approach and somebody pulls out in front of me and it's kind of outside of my control and I have to do a go around, okay, that's perfectly acceptable. If I am in an engine out situation where the examiner has announced engine failure and has pulled the throttle to idle or lowered, done whatever they have done, and you have done your emergency procedures, and you're coming in too hot and too fast and whatnot, and you're going to overshoot your spot, that is a failure of the maneuver itself. Yes, you should do a go around. Don't plow it in, obviously, but you may get another chance to do it, or you may fail the check ride and have to, perform that portion over again. So, but again, always err on the side of safety. There have been times that I've taken check rides that I was performing a maneuver, something went wrong. I called it off and said, hey, let's try this again. And the examiner actually gave me some grace. He said, you know what? Yeah, you kind of mucked that up. You know what you did wrong, right? Yeah. Okay. All right, let's do it again. And then, I did the thing and it was fine. Okay. Maintain your altitude and your airspeed. This goes back to kind of the professionalism that we had before, or we were talking about before. In the standards by which you will be taking your check ride, there will be altitude minimums and maximums. So like generally, like in the PTS, it was plus or minus 100 feet as you're navigating from point A to point B. For commercial, it was plus or minus 50 feet. In the ACS, it's roughly the same. And then heading is, plus or minus 10 degrees. So keeping that heading within the tolerances, keeping the altitude within the tolerances is critically important. So always keep your scan going as you're flying. Now, expect a distraction or emergency during high workloads, meaning I've had examiners, when I'm reaching down to change the frequency to transition out of, one airspace, or I'm about to go into another and I'm picking up weather or something like that, my hand is down, turning the knob to change the frequency to get to this thing. That's when the emergency happened. That's when the engine failure happens. When you are distracted momentarily, or when the examiner literally drops a pencil or pen at your feet and asks you to pick it up, which I've had before, he may announce an engine failure, or that may be the moment that says, hey, loss of tail rotor effectiveness, whatever it happens to be. It's going to be most likely during a portion of high workload, or a portion of when you're distracted. Don't get mad about it. Just expect it. This is all part of the fun. What he wants to do is assess whether or not you prioritize what is most important at that point. The pencil that he dropped is no longer important in the event of an engine failure. So I'm going to ignore the pencil for this moment, and I'm going to lower the collective down, right, and aft, enter in the auto rotation. Okay. Or if I'm changing the frequency and my engine goes out, I don't care about that frequency. I don't care about the radios anymore. I am lowering the collective, I'm going to start the memorized emergency procedures, and then I'm going to, go from there. If I need it, Mayday, whatever, then I can adjust the frequencies. But prioritize what is safe. What do you need to do first and foremost? Okay. So expect that distraction or expect an emergency during periods of high workload. It is perfectly okay to say, please stand by to the instructor when you're listening to the radio, or when you are under periods of high workload, you can say, hold up. What I've had in the past is I'm trying to listen to the radio and I got the examiner squawking about the time that he went to Vegas with whatever. And I'm like, please stand by, let's make sure that we're safe first, and then I can engage you and I can respond to your questions. I had a good rapport with this examiner, but I literally told him, hey, shut up for a second, hey, expect and don't be bashful if for safety of flight, or if you're missing something critical, to tell the examiner to stand by. Be polite about it, and then re-engage with him afterwards. Depending on the area for which you're flying, and this flight is going to be taking place, they will be passing over a number of fields for an emergency procedure. And you may get to a particular part where not a whole lot of good stuff out in front of you, or to the right or to the left. There may be a really good spot that you're either on top of, or maybe like right behind you. So always, always, always be thinking in the back of your mind, if the engine quits, where am I going? Okay. The good spot may be behind you, and the examiner wants to see that. He's like, yeah, you shot for the, the 100-foot strip that, you barely got in, but there was like 2 square mile field behind you. Like, bro, what? That is all I have to say about the check ride itself. Relax, be confident, be professional, be courteous, treat it like a lesson. Hopefully every single check ride that you take, you will learn something. I learned about this from this check ride. I learned about this from this check ride, and I learned about that from that check ride. Don't worry so much about failing. If you do fail, it sucks. I get it. It's a hit on our ego, but at the same time, you're going to be okay. They're not going to take away your birthday.